She's been with Microsoft, however, for over 15 years and has engineering roles in both internet hosting and corporate networking. She's currently a member of the corporate network architecture team focused on IP routing and MPLS, and a lady after my own heart, gravitates towards controversial technologies like IP multicast and now IPv6. So, Justine.
Very nice introduction. So first I'm going to start with my disclaimer that I'm with Microsoft IT and not a part of any of the product groups. So anything that we're doing wrong has nothing to do with me. But if you do have issues with something, I can get, and is Ed here?
He is.
There's our buddy. Microsoft people, there's Ed. I actually reached out to Dave Whipple and Greenberg, and they're putting together an alias for me to have people email to request Azure IPv6. So I will be getting something to people that I just think that's going to be more productive than him just deleting stuff in his mailbox. Okay, so I don't know how to start. Do you guys start this for me, or?
No, sorry.
You thought I knew because
Yeah, it's a Windows machine. So here we go. And then that should just come up there by magic, but I think he maybe has to press a button at the back.
I thought they did some magic back there.
Yeah, you certainly.
There we go.
We're now. Good.
So first off, everybody, throughout this, the last 2 days, I've been noticing the Windows logo with the little swirlies. This is the new one. So this is our new Metro. There are no more swirlies. So my presentation's about, we've been having a hard time. We kind of did the IPv6 deployment. We were a part of IPv6 World Day. Microsoft participated in IPv6 launch. And so we got IPv6 rolled out. We announced 32s regionally in the internet. A lot of development people got on board, a few app people, and then it just kind of, as far as we're concerned, we're kind of done. So we've done the v6. We, brought a few sites up during launch. They're not still there. So I'm going to kind of talk about now what the next step for us is, and if dual stack is where we're supposed to be, then where do you go from there? So my agenda, where do I hit the, do I have to use this thing?
Don't think you have to. I think you can page up, page down. I think page up, page down will get you through. Just.
Yeah.
No, it won't. Maybe that will.
I swear I really am with Microsoft. Oh, I don't even have it in, it's not, do you guys put this in presenter mode for me?
I thought I did.
F5, yeah, I thought you did. There we go.
We're doing good.
Okay. So the agendas, I'm going to quickly just go through the evolution of IPv6 and Microsoft's network, the current state of the network, an issue that we've run into that this talk is all about, our IPv6 killer app, and the solution we put in place, the results of the solution, and kind of what we think the next steps are. So IPv6 evolution was, we did isotap tunneling. The product group had isotap running on servers well before this, but in 2006 the network group got involved and enabled isotap on the routers, and we ended up with a much bigger deployment. So isotap was the way that we connected developers and labs over the corporate IPv4 network in the early days. Then leading up to World IPv6 Day, we started, a lot more IPv6 was rolling out. I think we got our first 32 and started advertising that on the internet around that same time. Started looking at moving away from our current proxy server to just following a default route and using firewalls and our security edge to access the internet, because our proxy product, UAG, wasn't going to ever support IPv6. So all that work started around 2011. Then people got real excited about IPv6 launch day and wanted to be a part of that. It was kind of like a little bit like dog and pony. We can show that we can do this. Bing IPv6 enabled, Xbox IPv6 enabled that day. Unfortunately, Bing has since disabled IPv6, and Xbox still has IPv6. So pretty much, I think the community can agree that IPv6 World Day was a success. Everybody was very excited. Now leading to the next steps. So currently in the network, the operating systems, Windows 8, Windows Server 2012 R2, pretty much all the operating systems are v6 capable and prefer v6 by default unless somebody sets that differently. We deprecated ISOTAP, it's no longer in the network, and the goal is dual stack everywhere. And again, my talk is about a small IPv6 only pilot. Current stats, 100% of our WAN is IPv6 enabled. We recently we finished in the past few months a migration from OSPF v2, v3 to ISIS single topology and flattened our AS structure. It has improved our IPv6 because we had traffic. People really weren't keeping up with the OSPF v3 metrics, and we would have traffic when services moved, taking a different path. Unbeknownst to the client, that the v6 their application would be performing worse. And again, it was IPv6 path was a different metric than the IPv4. Unfortunately, I ran these stats right before coming here. I thought that the policy is that IPv6, when a new site's deployed, when you go into a site, if you upgrade a segment on a site, you're supposed to deploy IPv6. The deployment team said that that's what they were doing. And this has really been over the past month that we've discovered that's not the case. So it's kind of a big deal now, and there's a project underway to get everything dual stack. It just shows about a third of our route table is IPv6 compared to IPv4. And then I just wanted to show a quick comparison of our A to Quad A records in the different regions. And you can kind of see that development, again, are the biggest IPv6 users. So it really is the guys that write up the operating system, the stat guys, that are interested in IPv6, which is a completely separate group than the people writing the applications on top of that. So evolution continues. Security infrastructure now. We had some issues in 2011. We had issues with the firewall when Netflix enabled IPv6. We had issues when Office 365 moved 4,000 mailboxes to IPv6 without telling us, and all that traffic hit the v6 firewall that did software forwarding in some portions of it and knocked the firewall down. So temporarily, they actually had to filter IPv6 Netflix from the network until we got the firewall upgraded. Now we can handle it. Other security components, malware detection, deep packet inspection. I'm asking the security guys, they're telling me that the log information they get, what they need to see, that they're doing fine with IPv6. I don't have all the details of that, and I didn't know every acronym that they threw at me, and I have an appendix at the end that kind of describes what all these are. And we got NetFlow v9 deployed. We got that deployed first, and then I think it was maybe 6 months to 9 months later, we actually had controllers that could consume v6 NetFlow data with IPv6 records. And correct me anywhere here if I'm wrong, Marcus. Corporate on-prem data centers they're IPv6 enabled. Again, their expectation is they're supposed to be. What I've been finding in the past 2 months is that they were dual stack enabled, then they had issues with dual stack and disabled IPv6. An interesting question I got about a month ago is, could they go to v6 only and not have to do dual stack at all? And I don't know, because I don't know what the solution is going to be to get the v4 people to them. So that was kind of an interesting, but we do have F5 load balancers, but only a couple VIPs on them right now. Again, internet peering, we've got a 32 from each of the registries, Aaron, Wright, AppNick, and we advertise 48 out of multiple data centers within those countries. And we enabled direct internet peering for labs doing development that are just v6 to v6 that don't go through any kind of firewall. They're monitored, but they kind of have open access. That's all in place. Even after, 2006 is when this was rolled out. We've done IPv6 training, I think at least twice, and here we are in 2015, and I'm hearing that people don't understand IPv6. They're afraid of the address space, and when something doesn't work again, they're turning IPv6 off, which really kind of makes it hard to go IPv6 only. So, again, I am 2 years later from, about 2.5 years from the IPv6 world launch. Everybody thinks now that we're dual stack. Management is, if we have v6 and v4 everywhere, why are you even talking about IPv6 only? We can run this for a while. That's the solution, is dual stack. We're done for a few years. The only problem being is that we have no more RFC 1918 or even space like shared transition space. So Microsoft corporate kind of houses all the developers that develop for Xbox Live and Azure, Microsoft.com, Windows Phone, the list goes on. and we're all trying to talk to each other through private space, and we have run out. I mean, there is just no, so now we're even overlapping. So I could have somebody, a dev in a building that's trying to access services, back-end service for some coding work they're doing in an Azure data center, and we've had conflicts. So we're spending a lot more time now working together on where are we overlapping and putting in filters so we don't actually leak to each other. It's a nightmare. So I mean, this is really the only other solution we have, and for labs that'll come up to me asking for a 16, is that they go out and buy public space. And no one's going to pay, you're not going to get, dev guys or an IT department is going to give me budget for address space, let alone the gear and tools and everything else we try to get budget for. So management's response to the fact that we don't have address space was shock initially and then disbelief. Kind of self-explanatory, trying to squeeze blood out of a turnip. So I finally convinced them that, yeah, this is a problem. Sorry. Finally convinced them it's a problem, and now, what are we going to do about it? What things do we want to try? So there was a discussion about carrier-grade NAT within the corporation, and re-IPing all the buildings to use the same space and natting between buildings, anyway, so no, I didn't want to do that. Since we have to go NAT 6.4 eventually anyway, as more and more of our services go IPv6, and we want to potentially push that. We go IPv6 native when we push the NAT 6.4 function to our edge, just for internet people coming in. We decided to do this now. Direct Access, our VPN solution, had a DNS 6.4 instance enabled on the network. They had a 96 they were using for the Direct Access Teredo connectivity. So I just leveraged their DNS server. I should have hit that already. Anyway, so I leveraged their DNS 6.4 server. We had a couple guys were doing DHCPv6 stateless testing in the network. So when we've been, to date, we've been using Slack. So I just used the DHCPv6 they had set up for options so that I could provide the DNS 6.4 server. Initially, I had the people on the pilot manually configuring them, but I kind of wanted to see how well this was going to work, and if I go into of a production with this, that I have redundancy. And there was an ASR1K in the lab, so I plugged that into the corporate network and configured it for NAT 6.4. And so this is what the network looks like. Again, the DNS server already existed. I have in the building router a dual stack uplink to the NAT 6.4 box. And we set up, initially I just was doing V6 only with some wired devices. I have a couple guys that were devs. And actually what I did is I tried to pick, for the pilot, different user types. So I had an admin on there. I have my boss's boss, who is the manager of IT and calls me every day anytime any little thing doesn't work. So I really get to know what is or isn't going to work on the network, and he's going to be my support person when we try to do this to the entire building. So I have IT manager, I've got a program manager, network engineer, and a developer. My biggest problem is a developer, because the different things that they're doing, running some homegrown IPv4 only applications that people have used within Microsoft. So I created one static entry for his machine to be able to access it via him to be V6 only and to be able to do the NAT in reverse for V4 clients to be able to reach his machine. But we don't want to do that as part of any of this production rollout. So the DNS server, and I actually, if any of that's wrong, I replaced originally on the drawing I almost sent, I had all our real addresses. And I was encouraged to use the documentation prefixes. So the DNS server network address, I don't know if that's a VIP or the physical server. I don't know how much redundancy they have in. I'm assuming it's a VIP. And then they already had that 96 as their address range for doing the DNS V4 to V6 synchronization. And then just a small range that I'm using as my NAT pool. So pretty much it didn't take, I set this up in a day. The configuration stuff worked. The issues I had were, and this is what worked, so any sites that are native IPv6 worked. Again, I wasn't able to find, I kept scrolling through the Quad A records on the corporate side, and they had deprecated the V6. I couldn't get to it, so I didn't find any good test networks internal on-prem to the on-prem data centers, even though I know they have them. The other thing is we don't have reverse DNS enabled, so it's kind of hard for me to track a host name from the IPv6 address, and I have that request into the DNS guys. So Office 365, Xbox, just hitting the site Xbox, I can't download videos over IPv6. Microsoft.com just updated. Windows Update, I haven't tested it myself, but all the Windows Update people that said yes, it's enabled, and I think the guy from Akamai, you actually can pull Patch Tuesday, Microsoft Updates from IPv6, which I thought was pretty cool. And then this is all the stuff that I had to do over NAT 6.4. So Yammer, doing drive mappings, remote desktop. I did the Xbox, watched a video in the office, all in the interest of, for this pilot, for the project. And when I say no noticeable feedback, it is, the particular person to me is the admin, that I've had her on this for a month and a half, almost 2 months, and I've never heard anything from her. And I even go into her office and just go, how's things going? And everything's worked, and you haven't gone to any sites. And I mean, a lot of what she's doing is going through the NAT 6.4 box, but everything works for her. So she doesn't do development stuff. In my case, and I guess I should go on to the next slide, but there's certain tools that I use. I used an X-Windows client on an application, and those kind of things, some of the things that network engineers were using, I'm having issues with, and I'm even having issues with the NAT 6.4 box. So I'm still trying to work through those. But as far as the program manager and the admin, they haven't, anything they're doing in the network, they haven't noticed any performance difference, even though they went from native v4 probably to the application and are going through this NAT box. So Skype is the biggest pain. I think we were talking before about that, that they're using 464 XLATs for mobile phones to be able to go IPv6 only, and I'm wondering what the difference is, and can we get that same functionality? And I have a thread going on right now. Can we get that same functionality for the desktop? To go v6 only? And then somebody else in this group asked, what about having that functionality on a v6 only server? So what if a CLAT functionality was in the Windows, just built into the Windows operating system on the server side? So I'm going to kind of put that out there and see. I'm going to see what comes back with my questions on that, or just anything that allows me to do a NAT functionality in the client as opposed to outside. Well, in the case of Skype, you can't. It's not going to work. Then the non-client devices. So I actually had our vendors on here and we're told to take it off, but the IP phones we were using did not support IPv6. The security cameras in the building did not support IPv6. The conference room, we have these conference room monitors that tell you who has the room for how long. Those don't support IPv6. So this was interesting to me on all the devices that didn't used to have IP that have IP now, and they're all doing IPv4. So I don't know the difference between Internet of Things sensor stuff and devices, TVs. My TV at home, and I got a smart TV. It's not as smart as having IPv6. And I mean, I can't even imagine going into Best Buy and asking for a TV and asking if it's IPv6 capable. They're not going to know what we're talking about. So this is a challenge that going forward, we know we're going to have to have a dual stack network. I'm not going to let anything be IPv4 only, but we're going to have dual stack for these kind of devices to plug in each building until I can figure out how to, either they move to v6 or I can do some kind of translation. I haven't even thought about it, and I definitely don't want to mess with the security camera stuff yet. So the pilot results, pretty much issues I had, not all of these are on here. One of them is with our DA service. One of the things it does is it runs an application and it checks to see if you're on the corporate network or if you're at home. And it detects when you're not on the corporate network, and it builds the IPv6 Teredo tunnel back to the DA server. That doesn't work when you're on the corporate network doing v6 only. It fails. So I had to opt out of that. I had to opt out of being able to use direct access for my VPN connectivity and go back to an old IPv4 only based method of VPNing in. So it's unfortunate because I was using DA to hit v6 only servers from home when I came into the network, but moving my client to it, because I really wanted I got to eat my own dog food, and I'm asking everybody else to go on this, and I had one side machine that I had on v6 only, and I maybe touched it like once or twice a day. So I just, every time I'm in the office, I'm v6 only, and I just work around the machine I have as a backup is only if I have to hit something that I can't get through IPv6 or IPv6 natted. The other issue is since the Windows clients, so I got that worked out with group policy that I wasn't going to be a part of DA, so now I can connect to the network. The second issue is I needed to be able to, for the clients and myself, move quickly from IPv6 only to dual stack if there was something I needed to have access to. And what I did is relied on wireless. So I didn't have wireless connectivity when I was in my office. So I changed the wired network to IPv6 only. And I would disable the Ethernet and bring up my wireless. Or if I'm in a meeting, I know I can have connectivity to get access if I need it. The switching back and forth from dual stack IPv6 wireless to V6 only wired, the addressing and things just got kind of confused. So I tried to do a release renew to have it kind of re-request. Well, there's no release 6, renew 6 in Windows if you don't have a DHCP server. So I ended up having to, somebody help me with a PowerShell that would just restart the adapter. And that worked 99.9% of the time, except for the IT manager, whose machine is not sending a router solicitation. And he's going from wired to wired. He's got dual stack and in his office, because it's his desktop, but he wanted to be a part of this. When he goes to IPv6 only, he waits 3 minutes or somewhere around there for a router advertisement to get his DNS 6.4 server. So he comes up and he gets his V6 address and he can talk on the internet, but it takes him that long to know that he's got to use a different DNS server. And there's a whole long story that we do have another DNS server floating around in the network on the old FECO addresses, the dynamic DNS that's been deprecated, but we still have some test dev guys that have that, so that will show up as a V6 DNS if you don't override that. So he gets that, he doesn't have the connectivity he needs, and tracing it down, because my machine hasn't had a problem, anybody else in the pilot hasn't, and every trace that I've done is he waits, he comes on, does a solicit with DHCP V6, then nothing after that, a few LLMNRs, and then he gets the router advertisement and then does the DNS 6.4. So that's something, and it's in the client because we're all running the same operating system. I've updated his drivers, but anyway, so that's kind of a big deal. I'm still figuring out the IPv4 embedded or how I'm going to solve that if the application, if I don't make a DNS request to get that synthesized bit to work. Relying on NAT. I mean, doing the NAT 6.4, it's still a NAT. There's scaling. I'm not as worried about that and I have to do stateful NAT 6.4 because our problem is address space. I don't have enough to do a one-to-one, so I need to try to overload it as much as possible. Fortunately, this initial implementation, what we're going to try to do is have these in the buildings. Do maybe 4 or 5 different types of buildings so I can get different traffic characteristics, and then move it to the distribution. So I have, and the more people are encouraged to go to V6, then I'm going to move the functionality further and further away that you can end up hairpinning. In a building, you can go all the way up to another location to come back down, and it's going to be poor performance. We'll go V6. But initially, we're trying to keep the NAT 6.4 as close to the clients as possible. Operations and troubleshooting, again, is V6, I don't know why it seems to be a problem. And again, there has been training. The ops staff still, most of their calls are still IPv4 related. They just don't. And if it's dual stack, they don't know which one the application's using anyway. And honestly, troubleshooting, when I've been troubleshooting my boss's machine and his address would change, I mean, I just completely forgot the whole V6 thing and which address I'm using for which kind of connectivity and just looked at his MAC address. So that's going to be hard for them to really know what they're looking for. And should I be using this, the temporary address for this, and I'm using the public address for this, and the link local for this. But basically, again, things just worked. I mean, better than I thought they would, other than the issue with I've got to figure out that machine issue that it's not getting the DNS server, or just have them statically do it, but I can't roll out a building-wide pilot. And what this is leading to, I don't know if I say that yet, before I read this part, what this is leading to is my goal is to take our building, and it's an IT building, and move all of the wired subnets just like, one night, stop DHCP v4 and enable IPv6, and they're going to come in and that's the connectivity they're going to have. So there's going to be some emails saying, this is the pilot, you're going to have wireless as a backup. Anybody that's hosting anything, the other problem we have is in some of our buildings we have dev guys that host servers under their desk. Getting them to move, and if I have to rewire them, getting them to move to dual stack and taking this pilot further. Then the next step of that is how do I, again, I have to have this backup to v4. Either I have to have something in the client that's going to talk to something v4 only, or I have to have somehow easy for the customer to switch maybe between a dual stack and a V6 only VLAN, or anyway, we're talking about that now, of how we can make this. Right now, it's easy just to disable wireless or to move a cable if somebody's working with those people, but how do we do something that I can have them do it without manually, but without having to, in the case of IT, it's fine, but as we move this further out, without having to have them know too much about what's going on under the covers.
5 minutes, Justine.
Okay, so the last, our ongoing work is, and this is the whole discussion on DHCP v6 versus Slack. There were reasons, the troubleshooting thing of having to figure out that restart net adapter was an issue for me. There's nothing that from the client that I can wake up the router to tell it to give me, I just got on here, I'm not going to wait 3 minutes, give me the information I need. And again, in our environment, we have dev, so we have Xbox controllers and that kind of stuff. So maybe Slack belongs in environments where people are doing dev for home networking, and it's DHCP v6. So anyway, we're having this ongoing debate internally, and people are still on both sides of the fence. DNS 6.4 needs to be deployed globally on our DNS servers, not just on this DA server as a backup. So I'm working with the DNS group on that. We do multicast in our network, and there's no IPv4 to IPv6 multicast translation, and no one's going to do it. So the video people are going to have to deliver it v6, and I have to have that functionality. So a v6 only client has to be able to receive live video over multicast, so that needs to get enabled in the network for those clients to be able to go v6. I need to do redundancy testing since it's stateful. The two ASR1Ks, does the failover work well if I have a building that requires high availability? And I have explore other translation options. I don't think there are any other, but I didn't know if MapT was going to do anything for me, but it doesn't seem to be anything for when you're trying to go v6 only on the client side. There's a lot of mobile work, but I don't know what people are, I don't see a lot of work in going v6 only and recommendations for the data center and for the client in the enterprise. So, oh, and IPv6 is not a transit technology. This isn't AppleTalk, DECnet, and all of those. This is what I'm trying to explain. Because it really was. After v6 launch, everybody's, oh, we could do this. We're excited now. We got these servers up. And then they, the Quad A's went away, and everybody went back to their day job. And, we're 3 years later, and I'm the only one. And honestly, I'm only interested in IPv6 because I am tired of people trying to get IPv4 addresses out of me that I don't have. So I'm very motivated to just get back to, so it's not even the feature thing, it's like, let's just get this v4 thing done, and let me get back to other stuff that I'm working on. So that is the end. Any questions?
Mark.
You've got 2 minutes.
A quick question. You mentioned early on that Bing had removed v6 after having had it on initially. Do you know why?
Bing was being served through Akamai initially, and I think they tried to do it, and I got to watch how I word this stuff. I think they were doing some stuff on their own and not going through Akamai, and they haven't gotten that back up. But I'm being told they ran, I don't know what the issue is they ran into, but that should be, I watch it every day. I check it every day.
So let's have a pretty serious discussion here. If I think back to where we were a few years ago, we were really far from getting V6 launched, right? And we worked together as an industry. I think we are closer to V6 only than we were to V6 off the ground back then. Okay?
I agree.
Great. And if we could pull together on the host side, Windows, Android, and iOS, Apple iOS.
Yep.
We're nearly there. There's phones and TVs and stuff like that. And then Brzezowski's like in the CEA, Consumer Electronics Association, pushing V6 on them and all that. But in the enterprise, we get those three. And we're almost there. In Linux,
I didn't think about that. Everybody thought dual stack would be the cool thing, but once we're there, we're kind of good. And it sucks having two clients doing all the multicast traffic, the LLMNR, all that. We had our controllers, we had to adjust the neighbor discovery timers. I think when Windows, as far as right after Vista, when we actually integrated, and I don't know the RFC, but the RFC changed the neighbor discovery timer to be between 5 seconds and a maximum of 45 seconds, and then there's some kind of a random number in there, so each client kind of picks its time when it's going to talk, and that's what we were running into. We were just hammering the 6500 router CPUs. We're rolling over with a lot of clients of both V6 and V4, and if it's UDP traffic, I'm not resetting the timer. TCP will do that, so it was just, and the folks that I talked to that enabled dual stack in the data centers because they could, disabled V6 because they had issues with dual stack, not necessarily V6. So they're asking, can they just turn off the V4 and focus what they're troubleshooting on V6?
When you disable V6 and you have no address, then at all, then maybe it'll discourage that. And we need to engineer socially and industry-wide engineer something. An event, a certification, a interoperability test, the ENTC guys here, UNH IOL. We know how to do these things. We did this launch. We need to make a V6 only.
So let me
launch.
ask you this: how do we, for the, there's still people that are going to be on V4 and they don't know they are, and they have an ISP that's, whatever the reason are. Is it the responsibility of the ISP to translate for them, get some address space, and get them to our content that we just do V6 only, or is it the content provider side to have some kind of translator in there? Who should own that?
Here you go. I didn't know you were here, John. I was trying to speak for you there earlier.
I'll let John go first.
Oh, thanks. So I want to talk about one thing first about the CEA. We actually have the first interops scheduled for April, where the CEA has published some documentation in their tech and standards group that that is intended to help the CE community and the manufacturers have some guidance around how to implement V6. It's pretty.
What is CEA?
It's the Consumer Electronics Association.
Okay.
They basically run CES, which I think we're all familiar
Okay.
with.
Okay.
Yeah, Las
Okay.
Vegas, yeah.
Oh, the Vegas. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're not as far as we'd like them to be as an industry, but they're getting there, right? And then Lee, if you want to comment on the second question, knock yourself out.
Sure. Lee Howard, Time Warner Cable. I don't know whether it's the ISP's responsibility, because that's sort of a new expectation, whether the ISP would be providing NAT6.4. Right now, I would be delighted to provide a V6 only service for a customer, and there are several possibilities that we maybe ought to get together in a smaller group to discuss whether it's a IPv4 is a service that's an add-on value, or whether V6 only is a cheaper service as opposed to dual stack because it's easier for us to provide, or any number of other possibilities. I also want to say I really, really appreciate you doing this presentation, and I want to see you doing it all the time at every event I go to as you're making more progress and solving more problems. And I want to see this at Microsoft conferences and at CIO conferences, because I want them to see that Microsoft is working on it. And once it's possible for you, then they can say, okay, well, if Microsoft can do it, then we can do it with their products. And I'd like to.
I'm laughing because I grudgingly, a coworker of mine normally does these. Todd Thorson, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He's been at these events, and they asked Todd. Todd couldn't make it, and he's like, "Oh, it's easy. It's just a little panel discussion, and you can this and that." No, you won't have to put a deck together anyway. And here I am.
I think you just became the lead of the IPv6 only launch.
Yes, exactly. And all I'm trying to do is get rid of IPv4 addressing issues.
So guys, we're running over time, and I just want, in deference to Helga, to give him his session. So, just